So, you guys know I've played a lot of Cyberpunk and done a lot of talking about different scenarios in the game. Things like Evelyn Parker's questline, as well as my desire for better endings. I've definitely had some criticisms, but I've still always remained supportive of the game. Now, I'm already a pretty avid anime watcher, so when I saw Edgerunners pop up on Netflix, I had to watch it right away. A couple weeks later, I got the urge to watch it again, mostly because I couldn't get the characters off my mind. I wondered what I might have missed and how it would feel going into it again, this time knowing how it ends. And it's pretty brutal. Last night, after rewatching episodes 3 and 4, some thoughts got stuck in my head about the difficulties Lucy was about to go through. And here I am getting those thoughts out. Now bear with me, this is all relevant to Edgerunners, and I'll come right back to it after I digress for a bit onto other topics. So, unless you've been living under a rock for the past month and change, then you've most definitely heard about the massive flop that Rings of Power has been. There are many complaints fans have had, but the one that stands out to me the most is how awful Galadriel's character is. If you read the books, you would know that Galadriel is a freaking amazing character, full of mystery and more like a demigod than an elf. Even though I really loved Peter Jackson's films, she never came off quite as magical and intriguing as she did the first time Frodo meets her in the Golden Wood in the book. It was close, but she was just so unique and unlike any character I had ever read about before. Everything about her was just mystical and unknown. Sadly, she's quite the opposite in the show, though, playing an unlikable and smug character whose motives are questionable at best. People everywhere have complained about her, how obnoxious she is, and how nothing she does even makes any kind of logical sense. One of the channels I follow, just some guy, got into the habit of calling her Strong Woman because it was so blatantly obvious that she was being pushed in our faces as such. Pushing a mangled notion of feminine empowerment even if it went against the overarching story and the characters. And she wasn't the only character like that. Another show caught a lot of flack for doing something equally obnoxious, and I'm talking about She-Hulk. Now, I've never been into American comics much. The only one I got into as a kid was Spawn, so I won't claim any kind of insider knowledge. Still, you don't have to go far into the show or really know anything about She-Hulk to know that Jennifer Walters is not the nicest person. The one scene in particular that stood out to me was where she is talking to Bruce about controlling her anger and how he has no idea what she's been through. I mean, this is someone who's supposed to be her mentor, and from all accounts that I've read, he did go through a lot in his own backstory, like tremendous amounts of loss. Yet Jennifer is just so incredibly demeaning, and I can't help but wonder how the people writing these shows feel that they're actually painting these women in a positive light. I mean, they tell us these women are supposed to be strong, independent, a female role model, but they're anything but. They're not even likable. They're obnoxious even. And it seems to be the trend with these big studios to keep popping these types of roles out like they all come from the same Pez dispenser. Even though people complain that they hate Mary Sue's, even though it's completely unbelievable and most of the time not even logical according to the stories they're portraying, but they still keep doing it and people keep complaining. And this is where it all comes back together, because then, out of nowhere, a show like Edgerunners comes along and completely puts them all to shame. In what comes off as an effortless accomplishment, they create a story with an incredible amount of strong female characters, women that everyone can appreciate for how awesome they are, and nobody is handing them that title for nothing. They earn it. I realized more people need to follow CDPR's lead because they really nailed it here. And this is a company that faced a huge amount of flack for delivering an unpolished game that didn't quite meet the expectations of the audience it was delivering to. And I tell you what, I couldn't even make a video about anything Cyberpunk 2077 related without someone flat out insulting the game in the comments or even telling me there's no way they'd play it again. And yet with Edgerunners, they managed to bring people back to the game because the show was so good. Their numbers increased dramatically over the weekend the show released, and everywhere you go, you see nothing but people talking about how much they love Becca and Lucy, who were two epic-level female characters from the show. In case you haven't actually watched it yet, you definitely should. I'm going to discuss a lot of spoilers from this point on, so you've been duly warned, but I suspect from here on out that I'm talking with people who have already seen the show and know the events I'm discussing. So, while other studios are struggling to make one female role model that's even likable, let alone competent, Edgerunners managed to make several female characters in just one show, capable, impressive women. And these women are written so well that you don't even notice it initially. They just blend in. They just are. They exist. And I had one of those moments where I realized why the show is so good. It's the characters. We're talking a crew of mixed sexes. I mean, there are more women than there are men in the group, and there's no separation or special treatment. It's not something that feels like they're beating you over the head with it, because they actually get along with everyone else. And all of the women are so different. You have Lucy, who looks like a typical beauty, but is anything but. She's deadly and incredibly smart. She's patient and calculating, and for a good part of the show, I couldn't even tell where she was coming from or what she was up to, especially after the part where she sells David out to Maine. I wasn't sure if everything they experienced in that Moonbrain dance was real or if it was just to stall him. Even after they get together, I wondered where she stood, until her backstory is finally revealed and we learn about the absolute shit show that she endured as a child. Being an orphan and forced to net run nonstop by Arasaka, going into the incredibly dangerous old net, she had to watch everybody she knew die, and at such a young age. Can you even imagine the survivor's guilt of being the only one to get out alive, and then constantly looking over her shoulder for fear of being caught? It's brutal, absolutely brutal. That sort of experience would break a lot of people, and yet Lucy comes out of it. And when she meets David, what wasn't clear to me at first soon becomes crystal clear when you realize that she didn't want to lose David. After seeing so many she knew die, she's thinking, I don't want to get too close to him and see him die. I mean, she knows the reality of being an Edgerunner. Most of them die. She can't bear the idea of losing him, and she still risks that loss to be with him, which is plain brave. And she does everything she can to try and save David, even when nothing should have been able to bring him back during his psychosis. After everything that she endures, she still manages to accomplish her dream of going to the moon, even though it's without David, which, by the way, I've got to say was probably the hardest scene to watch of the whole show. I'm just trying to not tear up while talking about it. And that's what makes Lucy such a great female lead. There are so many times when she saves David's ass with her monowire in actual combat. She's a competent fighter and a netrunner, and there's no blatant, David is better than me because he's a man. No, she's able to go toe-to-toe with him on her own merit. But it's not so unbelievable that you're left thinking, oh, come on, that's ridiculous. Like when it's just handed over to Mary Sue's who never lose. She's serious, but she's also kind of nuts, like that scene where she gets David out of the ambulance by driving a gurney through traffic with a crazy smile on her face, which was just insane, but I loved it. Lucy is just a complex and beautiful character, and this is what's lacking in so many modern shows. And another thing that nobody ever considers about what actually makes someone strong and likable is their ability to be vulnerable. Lucy didn't want anyone to know where she was coming from, but she still put herself out there by even falling for David and allowing herself to be with him, to telling him how she felt, living with her fears day in and day out, all that time knowing that he was going to get worse with his implants. That's not easy. And everyone watching the show is feeling it along with her. It adds a level of association, and that's what makes her real. Then you have Becca, who is a little short stack with a huge personality. She's kind of nuts too, but so loyal to her friends. She's honestly hands down the most decent person in the show, and if I could have anyone come through to real life to be friends with, it would be her, for sure. From day one, when she's introduced and spills coffee on that guy during David's first gig, I was cracking up.
You bitch!
Why are you yelling at me? I'm sensitive, you know.
She's so tiny, and I didn't expect her to act so confidently. During the celebration after the gig, it's pretty obvious that she's into David as well, even though to us, it's also obvious that he was completely head over heels for Lucy. She seems to struggle with not being taken seriously by him, but it never affects her actions. After the death of her brother, watching her go completely apeshit trying to kill the cyber psycho that offed him, it's obvious how much he meant to her, but still she manages to shrug it off like a tough cookie. And in the end, when David is up against insurmountable odds, Becca doesn't think twice about going with him, even though it ends in her death. But I'll be damned if she didn't go out like a legend. I mean, seriously, I can't think of a single person in the show that was as funny as her. It makes me so frickin' sad that there's never going to be a chance of seeing her in the actual game. Heck, even Dorio, who is legit a strong woman with a huge buff body, able to keep up with Maine's ridiculous size in the bedroom. I mean, and he's huge. She always seems to be the logical but also open and moral person when it comes to giving people a chance, though. And really tries to hold it together for Maine when he starts losing himself to cyberpsychosis later on in the show. She sacrifices herself to protect Maine when against Maxtac and ultimately dies. So many people would have just left him after he went psycho, but she stayed and left herself vulnerable. That is a freaking hero in my eyes, to stand up for her friend and lover even though there was no saving him. It's honorable as hell, and you can't help but feel privileged to have known these characters, even if they all have their flaws. I mean, that's what makes them good after all, and it makes them human and relatable. That's why they're all such successful characters. The whole collection of traits and attributes mesh together with their actions. It's amazing when you see a company like Amazon with a 60 million budget per episode and deliver a character that was pre-packaged to be outstanding, such as Galadriel, and somehow they managed to completely ruin her, while CDPR manages to pop out Edgerunners out of nowhere for a 3 million budget and absolutely schools everyone in how to make 3 female characters from scratch that are all brilliant, interchanging traits of being likable, vulnerable, trustworthy, badass, loyal, brave, crazy, and just flat out real. One could even say Kiwi is strong and independent too, but she's definitely not trustworthy. Granted, she might have held a grudge for what Maine did to her, or maybe she saw the ship was sinking and wanted to come out of it ahead. But still, why turn on the rest of the crew? I mean, we all know that kind of backstabbing shit runs rampant in Night City, but why be a part of the problem? So yeah, I know this kind of rant isn't typical of me, but I've had Edgerunners and Cyberpunk heavy on my mind lately, and I wanted to talk about it. Now I'm going to go and finish the rest of the show again, which, by the way, I'm not sure how I'm going to make it through without a whole box of tissues, you know, for the spontaneous times when my eyes start leaking. There's also a bunch of things in Cyberpunk 2077 that were added from Edgerunners, like a new quest where you can get David's jacket. I'm going to do another video at some point and just show you all the spots. I'm really hoping there is more content in the future there too in the game. So what do you guys think? I'm sure everyone has their own opinions on the show. Some might like it, some might still be pissed with CDPR and not want to like it, but I can't deny that they did a really excellent job in coming up with some amazing characters. Even if, in typical cyberpunk fashion, they then proceed to grind those wonderful people into meat chunks. It's the gift that keeps on giving tragedy and depression, but you can't argue that you wouldn't care at all about them dying if they weren't lovable to begin with. At least Lucy made it, right? Oh, and Falco. Can't forget Falco. If you liked the video, share, like, and comment. Don't forget to subscribe and check back now and then, because sometimes the algo hides my channel, and sometimes it picks specific videos to blow up. I never know what the heck is going on, and I kind of stopped trying to figure it out. Now I'm just trying to make videos that interest me, so that I can have some fun. If you want to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon and pledge whatever amount you want. And thanks again to my current Patreons for your support. It means a lot to me. I'll see you guys later.